maybe after we finish the legal, there's something I could actually even help you with. Let's figure out what the next thing in your life is going to be. And these are real, I think those are different conversations that most lawyers have. But people, as you say, Ari, they just open up because no one in their life, often, sadly, has ever asked them those questions.
Think about it.
Yeah.
They've got a problem. You've got a solution. Straight line of sight. What's in the middle of that? We fumble the ball by doing overeducation, free consulting, insights. And the challenge is that providing information now can be seen as persuasion, that you're attempting to move them somewhere to a next point in the process, and they feel you have a hidden agenda behind all that. And let me just clarify too, because I don't do any sales training at all. My specialty is trust training.
Welcome to the Renegade Lawyer podcast, the show where we ask the questions, why aren't more lawyers living flourishing lives and inspiring others? And can you really get wealthy while doing only the work you love with people you like? Many lawyers are. Get ready to hear from your host, Ben Glass, the founder of the law firm Ben Glass Law in Fairfax, Virginia, and Great Legal Marketing, an organization that helps good people succeed by coaching, inspiring, and supporting law firm owners. Join us for today's conversation.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Ben Glass. This is the Renegade Lawyer podcast, where I get to interview people inside and outside the legal world who are making a ding on the universe. And today I've got a great guest, actually a longtime friend, Ari Galper. Ari's based out of Australia. We'll talk about that. Ari and I met each other probably 10 or 15 years ago as we both were in the Dan Kennedy world. Now, I don't know, Ari, if you were Ari before Dan Kennedy or what in terms of what you're doing today. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But hey, thanks for taking the time to get on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and good to see you again. No problem.
Yeah, I've always known you as a sales expert. And, that's not something I really grew up training on. Fortunately, in our practice at Ben Glass Law, the marketing drives that hungry crowd that wants in. And so I've never really had to do it per se in our practice or get really good at it. However, there are many personal injury lawyers who need and use what I would call the high skill that you teach. And certainly in many practices where, look, Ari, the secret is I take my money from insurance companies. And however many other practices, they have to get fees up front and retainers and that sort of stuff. So let's talk a little bit about your journey into the unlock the sales game world.
Sure. So just to kind of give some context, so I niche and specialize in what's called trust-based selling, which is specifically created and designed for professional advisors in a low volume, high margin model, which means every single conversation counts and they can't afford to lose, even one opportunity. And so I built a whole body of work around that, which we'll get into. And I'll kind of give you the context behind how this all started. It was about 20 years ago or so. I worked for a software company at the time. I was in a conference call. We had a big opportunity. And if I close this one sale, it would probably double the business of the whole company in one sale. That's how big it was. And it was a big company. We sold software back then to track website movement, behavior, visitors back and forth on pages. And the key people in the company agreed to a conference call with myself. And I'll never forget this day. It was a Friday, 4:00 in the afternoon. I went in the conference room and I hit the dial. We had speakerphones back then. And so I hit the speakerphone on the button on the big Star Trek looking corporate phone. And the dial tone comes up, call the number. My guy picks it up. My contact is in a conference room. He's like, "Hey, Ari, glad you're here." And he's like, "Let us tell you who else is on the line with us today." I said, "Great." Next thing I hear is, "My name's John. I'm CEO." I was like, "Wow, this is a good person to have on the call." "My name's Julie. I'm head of global marketing." Amazing. "My name's Chris. I'm head of global IT." Oh my God. It's like everyone in this call was a decision maker. Like if it's going to happen, it's going to happen today. So I introduced myself, described what we do. Then we all logged in. I got to give them a live demo of our system and tool to be able to see their visitors. We put some code on the website as to track everything, kind of show them how it all works. And the first time they're seeing this, and I start showing them how they can see their statistics in real time. And I start hearing this noise on the phone call, like these gasps, like, wow, this is amazing. This is great. They start asking me all kinds of questions. How does it work? How do we install it? How do we get involved with you? How do we, get the thing going? And of course, I had all the answers and I was competent and I was answering the questions. We're going back and forth. I mean, there was so much chemistry on this phone call, Ben. It was like a love fest on the phone.
You could not have scripted it better.
No, there was no resistance. I mean, problem, solution, everything. And I wasn't overly aggressive. I was doing my thing. And this, an hour goes by, and it was just like the perfect conversation. There was zero resistance. And the call comes to a close, and my contact says to me, Ari, this is great. We love it. Look, give us a call a couple of weeks, follow up with us, and we'll move this thing forward. I said to myself, oh, thank you. Oh, this is the dream. And so I said my goodbyes. I took my hand and I reached for the speakerphone to hit the off button. As I'm reaching for the off button, by complete accident, now divine intervention, I hit the mute button instead of the off button. They were right next to each other, and a small click happened, and they thought I hung up the phone. In that split second, a voice inside of me said, Ari, go to the dark side. Be a fly on the wall. Go where no one's ever gone before in the world of selling. Just listen for a couple seconds. So I pulled my thumb back for a couple seconds. They started talking amongst themselves, thinking I had left the call. And what would you expect to them to have said from that call we just had, assuming that was pretty positive? What would you imagine they would have said?
Yeah, I would imagine that they would go, all right, who's responsible for next step? What's the order that we're going to do things in? Who's going to be the point person to get back to Ari?
That's exactly what I expected. But let me share with what I heard word for word verbatim. I'll never forget it. And that's why we're here today. Here's what they said. They said, we're not going to go with him. Keep using him for more information. And let's shop around someplace else cheaper. Knife and heart twist. I was in a state of shock. I was like, what? After all that? And I finally had the courage to hit the off button. And I looked at the wall and I said to myself, what did I do wrong? I was competent. I was professional. I was friendly. I delivered value. I gave information. I did everything I was taught to do by the books, the gurus, the seminars, my peers, everything I was supposed to do. And then look what happened. I got the exact opposite. And I said to myself, oh my gosh, I have got to stop this. Someone has to figure out a way to help the prospect or customer feel comfortable trusting you to tell you the truth. Why should we play these games back and forth? Why should we chase people? Why is all this going on? This very dehumanizing and very dysfunctional on how people communicate. Why not just tell the truth to people? And I realized there's this game going on when someone doesn't trust you. And that's why I call my program Unlock the Sales Game, Unlock the Game. To figure out how to help build enough trust with somebody in a short amount of time so they feel comfortable opening up to you and telling where they stand without worrying about them being chased or pursued or sold. And hence, that's the philosophy and premise behind our approach. The whole concept is you need to let go of the goal of making the sale and be 100% present and do a deep dive in their world and to help them unpack and to understand their issues and problems to the extent where they understand the gravity of it, the urgency of it, and the willingness to fix it. And that requires you or people who understand this concept to leave your world of the solution world and go into their world of the problem world. And that's essentially the essence of what I've developed over the last 25 years.
Well, so a couple things from that. So every lawyer who's listening to this needs to listen to the rest of this podcast, because being the lawyer, the tendency is to go and to solve the problem, demonstrate expertise, oftentimes giving out way too much information and probably not listening. So the second part is, all right, so you're now the coach, Ari. You're coaching the 20 years ago, Ari. Like specifically on that call, could you give us a couple of things that you would do differently today? And I know we did not go through the call line by line, but everyone who's listening gets the gist of the call. And we've all been on those calls with clients in particular. So what are the sort of top 2 or 3 things you would coach younger Ari on?
So I'll address both your questions you just mentioned, the whole idea of that lawyers are trained and conditioned to prove their expertise in advance of the sale. And then I'll answer your question now on that one now, because people always ask me that question: is what would you do if you went back to
Yeah.
that call? So I had a call originally with the contact to schedule the call, but the irony of all this is that if I had known what I know now, I never would have had the call.
Interesting.
Because in the
Yeah.
first conversation, I would have got to the truth, and I would have found out exactly where they were at, what the situation was, and I would have either delayed or not had the conversation because I would have known they were not ready and prepared to be honest with me or get the truth up front. So, because once you're in it, it's hard to back out of it when they're in control. And this is a battle of control, Ben. This is where you have to go into the conversation as the doctor and they're the patient, not the expert trying to prove your value. I know this sounds
Yeah,
totally contrarian because
it is. Yeah.
we've been taught to show your expertise and value because they're going to judge you based on how much you know. And here's what I figured out. In this economy now, post-COVID, they aren't judging you based upon how much you know. They're deciding whether you're the one to solve their problem or not based upon how you're handling them and your approach. And what I teach my private clients is that your goal is to stop delivering value. Instead, deliver clarity on their own issues, because we're all now in a commoditized industry. Attorneys, financial
Yes.
advisors are commoditized. So there's no way they can judge your expertise and qualify it as a layperson. They are not an expert to judge your content, and they're shopping you. So here we are delivering more content saying, hey, so that's the conundrum here that I've really spent years solving.
It's a really big point, and I was having a discussion with somebody recently about that. Is that on LinkedIn, someone was saying that lawyers are really poor evaluators of the marketing partners they hire because lawyers don't need or they don't know how to ask the question, they don't know how to measure. And so you start there. And I said, well, but always remember that the consumer is a really poor evaluator of how good we are, no matter, as you say, how much we do. Because usually in these calls, Ari, folks are asking questions. Do I have a good case? Can you win? How much do you cost? How long is this going to take? I've just done like the top 4 frequently asked questions by a prospect who's calling any lawyer in any practice area. Like, do you do this? How long will it take? What's it going to cost? And do you think I have a good case? And so you're saying that rather than demonstrating or trying to demonstrate expertise by being the guru who knows the law, bankruptcy, family law, DUI defense, things like that, is that you said we need to get clarity, or we need, I guess, the prospect to be clear and communicate clarity to you. So let's dig in on that a little bit.
Sure,
So what sorts of
sure.
things is a prospect maybe not clear until you ask the right questions or have the right discussion that
Yep.
you as the seller of services want them to be clear on or have clarity on? Talk about that.
Sure. Let's take this metaphor. And this is a metaphor that I use a lot, the doctor-patient conversation.
Yeah.
When you go to your doctor, what's the first thing he say to you? He says, where does it hurt? And you say, my shoulder. He says, let me take a look. It's a little sore, and then let's get an x-ray, see what's going on. He gets the x-ray, puts it in the light bulb, and he says, here's the problem. You've got that going on, you've got that going on, you've got that going on. You're like, oh my God, I didn't really understand why it was hurting me so much. There's a sense of clarity at that moment of like relief that finally you understand the gravity of your situation. Then the doctor walks you through a treatment plan of how to fix it, some medicine, some therapy, whatever it might be. And you walk out the door, you go to the front desk, and you pay the doctor. Not for solving your problem, it still hurts, but for clarity on the context of the complexity of the issue, as well as a roadmap of how to fix it. The pharmacist dispenses the medicine like 4 steps down the road, but a lot of attorneys end up providing the medicine with the diagnosis all mixed together in the hope somehow that will impress the client.
100%. Oh, you must have been like listening in on calls that lawyers have with clients, because I will say, if not 100%, damn near 100% of the discussion is exactly what you have just described. Again, not the doctor discussion, but the typical lawyer. Oh, I know all the legal. I'm going to teach. I'm going to educate you. I'm going to educate you, Mr. Client, about your case. So I would think, Ari, since no professional gets sales training in law school. Very few professionals get sales training. Like the dentist doesn't get sales training, the cosmetic surgeon doesn't get sales training, by and large, until they're out into the world, finding out how hard and challenging it is, and then they find people like you, right? So, talk to us about this mindset shift, because lawyers, I will tell you, are going to be fixed that no, you're wrong. Like, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing
Yeah.
this for years. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if they're coming to you, they're coming because they do have a problem that they want to solve: higher close rate, higher fees, things like that. But I bet
Yeah.
changing the mindset is a challenge.
It is a transformation because attorneys are trained to win the case, win the argument. I used to be on the debate team in college, so all my debate partners went to law school, and I went into sales. But I remember it very well of the cross examination and making winning the case. So the attorneys go into the conversation psychologically with the need to prove themselves to the prospect, to prove to them they have knowledge, because all they know is their expertise. And the challenge with that is that you start the conversation in your mind talking about things that you know and to prove that you're right. So they hire you. Now, the shift here is the difference is that we shift your conversation and your languaging and your questioning to a problem-centric approach, not a solution-centric approach, right? Because like you just said, when attorneys hear a situation or a challenge, their system automatically says to themselves, I can solve that. I can fix that. I've got the answers. Let me show you and prove it to you. Which is what every attorney does, which commoditizes the whole industry. And that's why people are being shopped right now.
As you say, so let's talk about marketing a little bit, because
Sure.
I imagine that you would then say that the conversation that we're having live one-on-one is even better if predating the conversation, the potential client has been not set up, but acclimatized to what this discussion is going to be about. So, and this is something lawyers are totally commoditized in marketing, by and large, unless they work with somebody like us, right? So talk to us about
Sure.
marketing language
Yeah.
that leads up to a one-on-one discussion.
Sure. So most attorneys that do marketing who haven't met you on the outside world will typically be promoting themselves. They're talking about their services. They're talking about themselves.
Yeah.
Call
Yes.
me, right? It's all about them. They're the solution. Come find me. That's traditional marketing. And that's where everyone loses their money in their shirt because they're commoditizing themselves and they're not resonating with the market. So we have discovered, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, we flip the model where pre-sale, pre-conversation, all your marketing content and messaging is about the problems you solve, not selling yourself as a solution, which is so contrarian in nature because we've always taught in marketing, traditional marketing, to let people know who we are, that we're visible and we're available, and to brand ourselves.
And
So
the problem is when someone has had an event and now they're looking for legal, and they see 400 of the same message. Again, poor judges of now, who do I call first?
what they're looking for is someone they can trust. And they're judging you based on the first point of contact that they connect with in your business, which is some kind of content, some kind of advertising prior, whether it's your website, whatever, prior to talking to you. They're sizing you up based on how you're being perceived. And if you're being perceived as promoting yourself and your services, but not focusing on their problems, then you're going to break trust with them and they're going to treat you like a vendor. And that's what's shifted over the last 4 or 5 years is that most customers and clients now are in shopping mode. They're shopping for a commodity,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And today, maybe for the last 20 years, they've been able to go and interview and meet and see on video and the internet 20 of us in 2 hours. Whereas in the quote old days, you had to make an appointment, drive to an office, sit down and meet with a lawyer. and general advertising was rather restricted. So 100%. So what you're saying is we need to figure out, first of all, in our marketing, like how to stand out. Dan Kennedy, our friend, how to show up differently, right, than
Yeah.
anybody else. Do it by focusing on the problems, the conversation the client is having in his or her own head,
Yes.
right? And the thing is with lawyers, like we know this. We know if we have experience in the subject matter, we've talked likely to hundreds, if not thousands of clients who have these problems. And oftentimes, like they don't even know like all the problems they actually really do have. Right. And so I
Well,
imagine part of that conversation too, which is, picking out the scab a little bit and unveiling things the client hasn't even thought about and, asking them in a way that gets them to realize, A, this person does know what they're talking about, but B, they really do know my problem.
that's a piece of our model there that we teach what we call the one call sale process, which there's what we call the iceberg. If you visualize an iceberg, at the top of the iceberg is when you're meeting with someone for the first time, they're describing to you their problem. Most professionals, when they hear the description of the problem, they make assumptions. They assume that's true what they're hearing. And they take that information and in their system, in their brain, they go, oh, I can solve that. And they find the solution in their brain and they start talking about it or asking some questions about it. Fact finding questions is not trust building questions. Fact finding is not trust building. It's cross examining someone. They don't get this deep feeling inside them that says, oh, he's my guy. I got to hire this guy. No, there's no sense of vulnerability or trust going on. So we have a series of trust-based questions that we developed that unpack, peel the onion back, and just like you said, go behind the problem to help the client and prospect understand that they themselves don't understand their own context of their own challenge, and hence the X-ray is what happens right there, and you show them that you understand them better than they understand themselves.
Hey guys, this is Ben. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast, not just the marketing and practice building strategies, but the philosophy of the art of living your best life parts, you should know that my son Brian and I have built a tribe of like-minded lawyers who are living lives of their own design and creating tremendous value for the world within the structure of a law practice. We invite you to join us at the only membership organization for entrepreneurial lawyers that is run by 2 full-time practicing attorneys. Check us out at greatlegalmarketing.com.
Can you give me an example, either in law or financial services, of a trust-based question or pattern of questions that
Sure.
would elicit this, again, this feeling of trust? This person understands me.
Yeah. So we have a series of questions that are in sequence, typically based on different professions, but just some generic examples might be when you meet somebody for the first time on Zoom or on a phone call. Obviously, hello, nice to meet you. Then you want to start kind of like this, John. If it's ask permission, like a doctor. If it's okay with you, John, can we take a step back for a moment? Can you walk me through your background, your situation, your story, and up to your current challenges and questions legally? We'll go from there. Would that be okay with you? Just the mere fact that you're asking permission
Yes.
of them to open up about their story is unheard of because they're used to is dropping some breadcrumbs over the fence and off the professional goes to a solution. So when you approach it that way, they unravel. They start judging you going, wow, he's so different. See, your differentiation is the approach, not the knowledge you've got. That's the first question. Yeah.
Yeah. And let me just pause you right there because it's such a life lesson. So let's just take this away from sales, a conversation at a party, right? The best conversation that someone can walk away from is a conversation where they have talked about themselves because you have asked curious questions. They will think you're the best conversant, the best party partner ever if you kind of just ask them the questions like you just asked. And the question I use a lot, Ari, is tell me what your superpower is. Like no one ever asked them that before, right? I was on a cross-country trip once and the woman next to me, I didn't know her, and she closes up her laptop and she stopped working. I said, hey, what's your superpower? And we talked for the next 3 hours. And turns out she's a world famous pain psychologist, lectures and teaches all around the world. But she says, that was a great question. Like no one's ever asked me that before. And she just started talking about herself. And in my practice, I represent a lot of people, obviously, that are injured and disabled. And I tell them, like, we can solve the legal, but tell me, Ari, like, what did you do? Like, what's your gift? What's your unique set of gifts and talents and interests? Maybe after we finish the legal, there's something I could actually even help you with. Let's figure out what the next thing in your life is going to be. And these are real, I think those are different conversations that most lawyers have. But people, as you say, Ari, they just open up because no one in their life, often, sadly, has ever asked them those questions.
Think about it.
Yeah.
They've got a problem. You've got a solution. Straight line of sight. What's in the middle of that? We fumble the ball by doing overeducation, free consulting, insights. And the challenge is that providing information now can be seen as persuasion, that you're attempting to move them somewhere to a next point in the process, and they feel you have a hidden agenda behind all that. And let me just clarify too, because I don't do any sales training at all. My specialty is trust training. How to build trust with a new opportunity on one conversation so they get to the point, what I call moment of vulnerability, where they say to themselves, he's the one.
Yeah.
They don't care about how you solve their problem. What they care about is, are you the one to solve it or not? And they're judging you based on your approach.
Because they have no good way to judge whether your problem solving solution is any good or not, or realistic or affordable or any of that. They just don't.
The only time they can legitimately judge your competence is after they're a client, not before.
Yeah. And even then, like, they don't, cross test, split test their lawyers.
Exactly.
So I interrupted. So you gave me kind of one. I think you were going to go to 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Take that to the next level now, that
Sure.
conversation.
So the first, obviously I mentioned the first question. If it's okay with you, take a step back, walk me through a situation, and we'll go from there. They start talking and talking and talking. Now your instinct will be, as they're talking, to look for questions to ask for facts.
Lawyers
That's what all
Lawyers
of course. They're sizing everything up and analyzing it and ready to ask the next question. And what I teach my clients is, you got to stop thinking about questions to ask. Just be present. Allow them to unravel. And of course, listen, but find the biggest challenge they've got. Just one of the biggest issue they have is most relevant to you and them. Once they're done talking, then you take a deep breath, because it'll be hard to hold in there. And you say this, you say, so you mentioned that your biggest concern was XYZ. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Here's the really cool thing about that, I have found, is you can just practice this in real life. Every server at a restaurant, everyone who's checking you out, although those are shorter conversations at a grocery store, you can actually have this conversation that you're describing and practice your active listening. And my next curious question that gets them to talk more, and oftentimes it is, hey, tell me a little bit more about that. And that's what I love your system a lot, because it is, again, it's usable across life, which is, I'm a live life big guy. Let's have an impact on the world by making other people just feel better about themselves.
A lot of this work that I developed comes from my son, Toby, who has Down syndrome. I wrote a book about him called Lessons from Toby, and he's very much present in the world. He has no hidden agenda. He's all about the other person. I learned from him, as his dad, how to integrate how he views the world into my approach, because this, you're right, is trust-based communication, not just trust-based selling. Could be. I once had someone give me a call one day. He's like, Ari, you saved my marriage. I'm like, what? Yeah, my wife and I were close to being divorced. We couldn't communicate, and you taught me how to make her feel comfortable telling me the truth, and now we're back together again. I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that it was so powerful. But you're absolutely right, Ben. Once you own this, applies to all areas of your life.
I love the transference of the skills to marriage. So one of the mantras that my wife Sandy and I have whenever we get a little bit upset at each other is, I'll say, hey San, when you say this, the story I'm telling myself is this. And that's a great, it's not like I'm blaming you. I'm actually taking responsibility for the story that I'm telling myself, but I'm giving in some information that we can now improve our communication skills with in the future. And so, yeah, it works a lot better than screaming. So let me just pause there and switch gears. So again, going back 20 years ago, you had this failed giant potential sale, didn't work. But now today, you have your own business with coaches, and I know you coach people all over the world. Let's talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial journey, because a lot of our lawyers obviously are running small law firms, either as solos or with a couple partners and associates and stuff. You've built something up over the years that's very powerful. You're actually pretty famous, in certainly in the Kennedy world and in the professional sales training or trust-based sales training world. So talk to us a little bit about that, because I'm sure this wasn't a one-way path that everything is easy and, and you're in Australia, which I know a lot of your work is in the United States.
Yeah, so I'm from California originally. Met my wife online and moved here 20 years ago. But yeah, we do global coaching. I've got a whole team of coaches behind me. But I think the essence on the entrepreneurial journey, the hero's journey, as they say, ups and downs, was I was always looking for the right model, the right process and system that I felt good for me internally, that would allow me to grow. And growing for us doesn't mean more clients. Growing from my perspective is I need to be home to support my wife and our kids. And I can't be on airplanes and I can't be working 24 hours a day. So my main goal that hit me years ago was the idea of not scaling my business, but replicating myself. And when I got the word replication in my brain drilled in, I realized, okay, now what I have to do here is I have to be able to replicate my process and system to other coaches behind me or other attorneys, whatever. You can replicate this yourself, to be able to follow a system and process that's so systematic that if I got sick today or went on vacation for 6 months, the business can run without me, which is very different than the whole idea of scaling, which is hiring more people and getting more software. And that's what really allowed me to drive me to this point now.
You've hit on another very interesting mindset block for lawyers. And it goes like this. My name's on the door. I have to be the one that does everything with the clients. You quickly saw that was not going to be a way to live your life in a way that fulfilled you and your family, right? And so was that, like, how did that light bulb go off? Did you just like sit in the corner and think about this? Or was there a guru, a coach, a book, a mindset, a mastermind group, or maybe a combination of things? You know what?
It was neither of all that. I have real constraints. I
Yeah,
live
yeah.
in Australia. I have about 3 hours of US time. I need to be near home. So if you look at those constraints, that forced me to think, okay, how am I going to grow this business without me breaking these constraints? And so that's when I realized, sure, my name's on the door as well, but I realized the name can remain, but I don't have to physically be there. By replicating myself with other experts who are underneath my name, who are using my methodology out right now, out in the marketplace, and are proud of it. And it's like, if you obviously heard of Stephen Covey, right?
Absolutely, sure.
Very famous author and speaker. Now, he passed away many years ago, but his business keeps growing because his name's still in the door, but everyone's on his team is using his process, his methodology, and his philosophy still remains behind. So once you realize that you're not a one-man person band, if you just think differently, different direction, you can take what you're doing and you can systematize it.
I like that answer. I had to.
I was forced to.
Yeah, yeah. So talk to us a little bit here in the last few minutes about folks, clients who do sign up with your program. I don't remember if you have different levels, or talk about the process. I know you've got a book. We'll talk about the book here in just a second. But the process of working with your team on upping the trust-based sales game, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's actually quite simple. It's literally all one-on-one private consulting. We do no group stuff, one-to-many programs, seminars. We just find this a very intimate conversation with people, and it requires them to be open to making the change and being brave enough to step up and go, how can you help me? So we basically work off of a model where a weekly single-hour conversation with people in a very short amount of time. The intervention itself only takes 4 weeks to make the shift. Not very long. You don't have to join a program for months. And it's not like that. It's like just come open-minded. We have a process that we do over a 4-week period via Zoom, and it's a quick intervention, but it requires the other person. It's like going to a therapist. If the patient doesn't own their own problem,
Yeah.
they don't come saying, "Hey, help me." They're the horrible patients. My dad was a psychologist. He used to tell me this all the time, Ari. He's like, never take clients who aren't open to change. And from that point forward, we reject a lot of people who just fight the concept. And anyways, it's a very simple model. It's one-on-one private coaching.
Yeah. Somebody has to be, willing to be coached, they have to be humble. And oftentimes when they're coming to you, they have been in the practice, in the field, in the profession for a long time. They have habits, they've reached a certain level of success or not, but they're struggling somewhere because otherwise they wouldn't be searching you out. Or maybe they heard about you and listening to a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason attorneys reach out is because of one core problem. They have leads coming in, opportunities coming in, but they aren't converting all of them that are qualified. They're losing a percentage of them because of their own unconscious behaviors of overeducating, doing free consulting, asking questions, and hoping the client judges them on their competence.
Now, let me ask you this, because you've talked about the one-on-one coaching and we've said like the attorney, the financial advisor. Is what you teach then transferable to the team? And then what is your advice? Because there's some lawyers who are just great lawyers and they're never going to be the ones to get this, but they may have non-lawyer staff who could pick up on this. So does that work as well?
Yeah, so we will do a small group unless it's in the same company.
Okay.
So we have attorneys who may have 5 other attorneys behind them. They don't have time to go coach the folks. But what we do require that the main person in charge get it first and be a success story first and own it first. We're not going to just bypass them and go to their people below them. There's no way. They got to own it, be the role model, and prove it to themselves first before they feel confident going behind them.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you need to have the success and then the mental buy-in of the owner. Well, that's great. And I know you have a book, Unlock the Sales Game. Let's talk about that for a moment. And for folks that are listening to this podcast, there's a way to get the book.
Yeah. So if this resonates with you, this message today, obviously, I do have a book called Unlock the Sales Game, and I've got a complimentary one for attorneys, designed for attorneys specifically. If you want to get that book, just go to www.arigalper.com, my name, /attorney book. I'm pretty straightforward. And if you want to have a one-on-one complimentary chat with one of my folks, and maybe you'll get to me, I'm not sure. Just when you check out with the book, you click the yes button. It'll take you to a calendar, schedule a 30-minute slot there, come with an open mind, and you'll see how we walk the talk.
And they would actually be seeing this process being carried forward. So I would say, even if you don't end up working with Ari or someone on his team, like take him up on this offer. My job is to connect smart lawyers to smart people. Ari obviously is a very smart guy. Again, I've known him for almost 20 years. And just sometimes walking through other people's processes and being fully engaged and open-minded is a way to help you move forward with your own practice. Ari, look, it's great. Remind me now, you mentioned your son. You have other children?
Yeah, so son Toby will be 20 coming up, and then 16 and 14. So yeah, they're a handful, but they're doing great. And I know you've got plenty of kids too.
We do. Yeah, my youngest is 21 now. So, but they still, doesn't matter how old they get, my friend. They always need mom and dad. They'll have some need for advice somewhere along the line. And
Exactly.
That's the way we want it. All right. Well, look, Ari, thanks so much for carving out some time today to be on the Renegade Lawyer podcast. Folks can go, and we'll put in the show notes, we'll put the URL for the book. And this is great because you're coming at the world in a completely different way, which is what entrepreneurs try to do so that we don't end up being commodities, because there's a ton of sales training out there. And this is just a different look and a highly successful look. Thanks, dude.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
If you like what you just heard on the Renegade Lawyer podcast, you may be a perfect fit for the great legal marketing community. Law firm owners across the country are becoming heroes to their families and icons in their communities. They've gone renegade by rejecting the status quo of the legal profession so they can deliver high-quality legal services coupled with top-notch customer service to clients who pay, stay, and refer. Learn more at greatlegalmarketing.com. That's greatlegalmarketing.com.